Hello again guys, this is the Commodore Amiga CD32 do-it-yourself floppy disk drive interface based on a design by Bruce Abbott in 1995. This is part 3, and in the last part, where we left off, I'd replaced an LS03 with an LS01. Now that an Aminet server is up and running again, I can show you the original package and the contents of the package which can be downloaded. Having tentatively finished the PCB, it's time to move on to the cabling. I'll be using these IDC cables to make 42 connections between the PCB and the expansion port connector. The PCB terminal strips are for extra checking of the circuit before I make the final connections to the expansion port on the CD32. So this is essentially a lot of continuity testing from the terminal strips all the way back to the legs of chips, so that I can make a diagram for the ribbon cable as a whole and not have to worry about the PCB connector pinouts. This is a more simplified diagram than shown in other videos of how I replaced the LS541 with the LS240 among some other chips. And some glamour shots. I've done the floppy disk drive power cable and data cable, and the ribbon cable that's hanging off for the expansion connector is still just cut, floating now, so I've disposed of the terminal strips. The actual expansion port connector was very difficult to solder due to the different layers of pins there, but I've managed it with heat shrink. And it helped to have a CD32 mainboard handy. Although I haven't gotten this one to work in a little while, I can still test for continuity between the ROM socket, which is where most of the connections are made, and the expansion port connector. Now we could call it a completed unit with a floppy disk drive interface on one end on the right there, and the CD32 expansion port interface on the other. For testing, I'll be powering the board from the auxiliary port on the CD32, which can be seen here. This is only temporary because that port's also needed for the keyboard or serial port. I don't actually have a working floppy drive yet, so this is just a power up test, make sure nothing blows up, gets hot, and the CD32 still works as expected. If you look carefully early on, you'll see a green light come on the circuit board, and that's actually the same as the power LED on the CD32, which is a software LED. I'm using the audio CD player to test the functionality of the joystick, and particularly the fire button, because the power LED and fire button bits are inserted into a new location and sent on to the Amiga. So I think that's about all I can test without actually having a floppy disk drive, which will come in time from an eBay seller, but I'll have to wait for the postman for that. See you next time.